You're 22 years old, working 2 jobs while finishing college, scraping together every penny just to pay for textbooks and gas money. Your parents constantly remind you that money doesn't grow on trees, that everything has to be earned through hard work. Then graduation day arrives, and your younger sister gets handed the keys to a brand new BMW while you're told you get nothing because you're already independent. But here's the twist they never saw coming. Sometimes the child they overlook is the one who's been building something extraordinary in secret. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The Henderson family had always operated on a simple principle. Madison was the star, and everyone else was just the supporting cast. Madison Henderson, 19 years old, blonde hair that caught the light just right, a smile that could charm professors into deadline extensions, and a GPA that had been carefully maintained at exactly 3.2, high enough to graduate, low enough to avoid any real academic pressure. Tyler Henderson, her older brother, had learned to live in that shadow from the moment Madison could walk. While she was taking dance lessons at 5, Tyler was mowing lawns to buy his own school supplies. When she needed a new laptop for her creative writing projects, Tyler was told his 4-year-old computer was perfectly functional. When Madison wanted to join the cheerleading squad, their parents, Robert and Susan Henderson, didn't hesitate to shell out $800 for uniforms and camp fees. When Tyler expressed interest in joining the robotics club, he was told to find a part-time job if he wanted to pursue expensive hobbies. The pattern had been so consistent, so predictable, that Tyler stopped expecting anything different. He watched his parents attend every one of Madison's volleyball games, cheering from the front row with custom t-shirts that read, "Madison's Mom" and "Madison's Dad." Meanwhile, Tyler's track meets were met with polite excuses about work schedules and prior commitments. He learned to look into the stands knowing he'd see empty seats where his family should have been. By the time Tyler reached high school, he'd developed a thick skin about it. He threw himself into his studies, not because he loved learning, but because it was the one area where he could excel without needing his parents' financial support or emotional investment. While Madison was getting tutoring for subjects she struggled with, Tyler was teaching himself advanced mathematics from library books. While she was getting driving lessons from a professional instructor, Tyler learned to drive from YouTube videos and practiced in the school parking lot with his friend's beat-up Honda. The disparity became most obvious during college preparation. Madison's college applications were a family affair. Professional essay consultants, multiple campus visits, and application fees that Tyler calculated could have covered his entire semester's textbooks. When Tyler applied to colleges, he did it alone, researching schools during lunch breaks and filling out applications on computers at the local library because the family computer was constantly occupied with Madison's schoolwork. Tyler had been accepted to Georgia Tech with a partial scholarship, but the remaining costs were still beyond what his family claimed they could afford. "We've already stretched ourselves thin with Madison's education," his father had explained, barely looking up from his newspaper. "You'll have to find another way." Meanwhile, Madison was enrolled at the University of Georgia with full financial backing, despite her average grades and lack of any particular academic distinction. So Tyler found another way. He moved into a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, worked 25 hours a week at a campus bookstore, and took out student loans for the remainder. He studied engineering while Madison majored in communications, a choice that their parents praised as practical and versatile. Tyler's engineering coursework was dismissed as too technical and not very social, as if his ability to understand complex systems was somehow a character flaw rather than an asset. During his sophomore year, Tyler discovered something that would change everything: cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. It started as academic curiosity. He was taking a computer science elective, and the professor mentioned Bitcoin in passing. That night, Tyler went down a rabbit hole that lasted until sunrise. He read white papers, studied market trends, and began to understand not just the technology, but the revolutionary potential it represented. While his classmates were spending their spare time at parties or playing video games, Tyler was analyzing blockchain protocols and studying market patterns. He started small, investing the $20 bills he earned from odd jobs around campus. He bought Bitcoin when it was trading at $3,000, Ethereum when it was under $200. His roommates thought he was wasting money on internet magic beans, but Tyler saw something they didn't: the future of finance being built in real time. The learning curve was steep and expensive. Tyler lost money on bad trades, fell for pump and dump schemes, and made every rookie mistake in the book. But he learned from each failure, refining his strategy and developing an intuition for the market that surprised even him. He started following developers, reading technical analysis, and most importantly, identifying projects with genuine utility rather than just hype. By his junior year, Tyler's portfolio had grown from hundreds to thousands. He diversified into DeFi protocols, NFT projects that actually had utility, and emerging blockchain platforms. He was still working at the bookstore, still living in that cramped apartment, still wearing the same clothes he'd had since high school. But in his digital wallet, something extraordinary was happening. Meanwhile, Madison was coasting through college with the confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Her Instagram was filled with sorority events, spring break trips, and shopping hauls funded by their parents' credit cards. She changed her major 3 times, from communications to marketing to psychology, each change requiring additional semesters and, consequently, additional financial support from Robert and Susan. Tyler watched this from a distance, feeling a mixture of resentment and motivation. Every time Madison posted about a new handbag or a weekend trip to Miami, Tyler put another $50 into his crypto portfolio. Every time his parents complained about money while simultaneously funding Madison's lifestyle, Tyler researched another promising blockchain project. The crypto market's volatility meant that Tyler's portfolio swung wildly from week to week. He watched his balance drop by thousands during market crashes, only to see it surge to new heights during bull runs. Through it all, he maintained his discipline. Never invest more than he could afford to lose. Never let emotions drive his decisions, and always think long-term. By senior year, Tyler had become something of a legend among the small group of students who were into cryptocurrency. He'd turned his initial investment of a few $100s into a portfolio worth 6 figures. But he told no one, not his roommates, not his parents, certainly not Madison. He maintained his modest lifestyle, continuing to work at the bookstore and living in the same apartment. The secrecy wasn't just about avoiding attention. It was about protection. Tyler had learned that money changed relationships, and he wasn't ready to deal with the complications that wealth would bring. He'd seen how his parents' favoritism toward Madison had shaped their family dynamics, and he suspected that revealing his financial success would only create new problems. As graduation approached, the Henderson family dynamic remained unchanged. Madison's upcoming graduation was treated like a national holiday, with plans for a massive party and discussions about the perfect graduation gift. Tyler's graduation, happening just 1 semester later, was mentioned only in passing, as if it were a minor administrative detail rather than the culmination of 4 years of hard work and sacrifice. Tyler had watched his sister glide through college on their parents' dime while he fought for every credit hour, every textbook, every meal. He'd learned to be self-reliant not by choice, but by necessity. And in that process of learning to depend on himself, he'd discovered abilities and opportunities that his parents never imagined he possessed. The contrast between the siblings had never been more stark. Madison was preparing to graduate with DEUR, a degree in psychology that she'd never intended to use, planning to move back home while she figured things out. Tyler was graduating with a degree in electrical engineering, a portfolio worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a job offer from a major tech company in Silicon Valley. But none of this was visible to his parents, who continued to see Tyler as the responsible but unremarkable older child who would always take care of himself. They had no idea that their neglected son had built something extraordinary while they were focused on their golden child. They had no idea that the balance of power in the Henderson family was about to shift in ways they never could have anticipated. The weekend of Madison's graduation arrived with all the fanfare the Henderson family could muster. The house was decorated with balloons in the University of Georgia colors, and Susan had ordered a custom cake from the most expensive bakery in town. Extended family members were invited, neighbors were told about the celebration, and Robert had even taken time off work, something he'd never done for any of Tyler's milestones. Tyler came home for the weekend, driving his reliable but aging Honda Civic up the familiar driveway. He looked at the decorations, the preparations, the obvious excitement on his parents' faces, and felt the familiar pang of being an outsider in his own family. But this time, there was something different in his chest. Not just resignation, but a quiet confidence that came from knowing he'd built something his parents couldn't see or understand. As he carried his overnight bag into the house, Tyler's phone buzzed with a notification from his cryptocurrency portfolio app. The balance displayed made him pause for just a moment. It was higher than his parents' annual income, higher than the cost of both his and Madison's college educations combined, higher than the mortgage on the house he was standing in. But Tyler slipped the phone back into his pocket without a word. He wasn't ready to reveal his secret yet. First, he wanted to see how this weekend would play out. He wanted to watch his parents celebrate Madison's achievement while continuing to overlook his own. He wanted to experience one last time what it felt like to be the forgotten child in the Henderson family, because Tyler knew that after this weekend, everything was going to change. Madison's graduation ceremony was a spectacle of family pride and social media opportunities. Susan Henderson documented every moment, from Madison adjusting her cap in the car to the final walk across the stage. Robert beamed as he recorded her receiving her diploma, loudly cheering when her name was called. The other families in their section turned to look, some smiling at the obvious parental devotion, others slightly annoyed by the disruption. Tyler sat between his parents, clapping politely when Madison crossed the stage. He'd attended dozens of Madison's events over the years, always in the role of supportive older brother, never the star of his own show. Today felt different, though. As he watched his sister wave to the crowd, Tyler's mind wandered to his own graduation ceremony scheduled for December. He wondered if his parents would show the same enthusiasm, though deep down he already knew the answer. After the ceremony, the Henderson family gathered for photos. Madison posed with her diploma, her parents flanking her with enormous smiles. "Tyler, get in the picture," Susan called, but it was clearly an afterthought. Tyler stepped into frame, standing slightly behind the family group, maintaining the same position he'd occupied his entire life. The celebration moved to Magnolia's, the most expensive restaurant in town. Robert had made reservations weeks in advance, specifically requesting the private dining room. As they were seated, Tyler noticed the other families around them, all celebrating their own graduates. He watched a father giving an emotional speech about his son's achievements, saw a mother presenting her daughter with a jewelry box, and observed siblings genuinely excited for each other's accomplishments. "Madison, we are so incredibly proud of you," Robert began, standing with a champagne glass in hand. "4 years ago, when you started at UGA, we knew you had special qualities. But seeing you graduate today, seeing the confident young woman you've become, exceeds even our highest expectations. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." Susan nodded enthusiastically. "You've grown so much, sweetie. Your communication skills, your leadership in the sorority, the way you've balanced social activities with academics. It's exactly what we hoped college would do for you." Tyler sipped his water and listened to the speech. Madison had indeed balanced social activities with academics, though the balance had been heavily weighted toward the social side. Her leadership in the sorority consisted mainly of organizing parties and managing Instagram accounts. Her communication skills were undeniable, but they'd been honed more through countless hours of phone conversations and social media interactions than through any academic rigor. But Tyler kept these observations to himself. This was Madison's day, and despite the years of unequal treatment, he genuinely wanted her to be happy. His resentment was directed at his parents' favoritism, not at Madison herself. She hadn't asked to be the golden child any more than he'd asked to be overlooked. "Now," Robert continued, his voice taking on a theatrical tone, "your mother and I have been discussing your graduation gift for months. We wanted to give you something that would represent this milestone, something that would help you as you start the next chapter of your life." Madison's eyes lit up with anticipation. She'd been dropping hints about wanting a car for weeks, showing her parents pictures of different models, and talking about how much easier job hunting would be with reliable transportation. Her current car was a 7-year-old Nissan Altima that had served her well through college but was starting to show its age. Susan reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped box. "This isn't the actual gift," she said with a smile, "but it will help you find it." Madison unwrapped the box to reveal a set of car keys attached to a BMW keychain. Her face broke into a massive smile as she looked up at her parents. "No way. Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious," Robert laughed. "It's parked outside, a 2024 BMW 330i in Alpine white, exactly like the one you showed us last month." Madison jumped up from her chair and hugged both parents simultaneously. "Oh my God! I can't believe this. This is amazing. I love you guys so much." Tyler watched the scene unfold with a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite untangle. Part of him was happy for Madison. She was genuinely thrilled, and her joy was infectious. Another part of him was calculating the financial implications. A new BMW 330i cost around $50,000, more than he'd earned in his entire college. Career from his bookstore job. "Can we go see it right now?" Madison asked, practically bouncing in her seat. "Of course," Susan replied. "But first, let's finish dinner. The car isn't going anywhere." As the family continued their meal, the conversation revolved entirely around Madison's new car. They discussed insurance, maintenance schedules, and whether she should get the windows tinted. Tyler contributed to the conversation when directly addressed, but mostly he observed his family's dynamic with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. When they finally went outside to see the car, Tyler had to admit it was impressive. The BMW gleamed under the restaurant's exterior lighting, looking every bit as expensive as its price tag suggested. Madison walked around it slowly, running her hands along the pristine paint job and peering through the windows at the leather interior. "This is seriously the best day of my life," she said, taking selfies with the car from every possible angle. Robert and Susan stood nearby, basking in their daughter's happiness. Tyler could see the satisfaction on their faces. They'd succeeded in giving Madison exactly what she wanted, confirming their status as generous, loving parents. "Tyler, what do you think?" Madison asked, finally remembering to include her brother in the moment. "It's beautiful," Tyler replied honestly. "You're going to love driving it." And he meant it. The car was objectively stunning, and Madison's happiness was genuine. Tyler's complex feelings weren't about the gift itself, but about what it represented, in the context of their family's long-established patterns. On the drive home, Madison followed behind them in her new BMW. Susan turned to Tyler in the back seat. "I hope you understand, honey, that we can't do something like this for your graduation. Madison is still figuring out her path, and she needs the support. You've always been so independent and capable. We know you'll do fine on your own." Tyler nodded, expecting exactly this conversation. "I understand, Mom. I'm not expecting anything." "It's not that we don't want to help you," Robert added, glancing at Tyler in the rearview mirror. "It's just that you've never really needed our help the way Madison does. You've got that engineering degree, you're obviously going to find a good job, and you've always been the responsible one. Madison needs a little more guidance as she transitions into adulthood." The logic was familiar and frustrating. Tyler's competence and independence, qualities that should have been celebrated, were instead used as justification for continued neglect. Because he'd learned to succeed without their help, his parents felt absolved of any responsibility to provide that help. It was a circular reasoning that had defined Tyler's entire childhood and adolescence. "Plus," Susan continued, "we've already stretched our finances pretty thin with Madison's car and college expenses. We're going to need some time to recover before we can consider any major purchases." Tyler almost laughed at this. His parents had just bought a $50,000 car, but were pleading poverty when it came to acknowledging his achievements. The message was clear. Madison's wants were their financial priorities, while Tyler's accomplishments were his own responsibility. Back at the house, Madison spent the evening showing off her new car to friends who came by to congratulate her. The driveway filled with her sorority sisters and college friends, all admiring the BMW and taking turns sitting in the driver's seat. Tyler watched from the living room window as Madison played the role of gracious recipient, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Around 10 o'clock, Tyler's phone rang. It was his roommate Jake calling from their apartment back in Atlanta. "Dude, you need to check your crypto portfolio right now," Jake said without preamble. Tyler stepped outside for privacy, opening his portfolio app as he walked toward the backyard. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Bitcoin had surged overnight due to a major institutional adoption announcement, and the ripple effect had lifted his entire portfolio. His total balance now showed a number that made him dizzy: $847,000. "Jake, how did you know to call me?" Tyler asked, though he was still staring at his phone screen in disbelief. "I've been watching the markets all day. That Ethereum play you told me about last month is up 40% just today. Plus, Bitcoin is having its biggest single-day gain in months. I figured you had to be seeing some serious numbers." Tyler walked further into the backyard, away from the house and the ongoing car celebration. "This is insane, Jake. I'm looking at numbers I never thought I'd see." "What are you going to do?" Tyler was quiet for a moment, watching through the kitchen window as his parents served cake to Madison's friends. "I don't know yet. This changes everything, but I'm not ready to tell anyone, especially not tonight." "When are you going to tell? Your family?" Tyler thought about the conversation in the car, about his parents' explanation for why Madison deserved a new BMW while he deserved nothing. Maybe soon. Maybe when the timing is right. After hanging up with Jake, Tyler remained in the backyard for another hour, alternating between staring at his portfolio balance and watching his family celebrate Madison's graduation. The contrast was surreal. Inside the house, his parents were hosting a party for their daughter's achievement and new car. Outside, Tyler was holding a device that displayed wealth beyond his family's imagination, earned through his own research, discipline, and risk-taking. The irony wasn't lost on him. His parents had spent years teaching him that money had to be earned, that nothing came without hard work, that financial independence was the mark of a successful adult. They'd forced these lessons on him through their neglect, making him scramble for every dollar while Madison was given everything she wanted. Now, through applying exactly those principles they'd claimed to value, Tyler had achieved a level of financial success that dwarfed anything his parents had ever accomplished. When Tyler finally went back inside, the celebration was winding down. Madison's friends were leaving, each one congratulating her again and promising to see the car again soon. Susan was cleaning up cake plates and champagne glasses, still glowing with pride over the day's success. Did you have a good time tonight? Honey? She asked Tyler as he helped carry dishes to the kitchen. Yeah, it was nice seeing Madison so happy, Tyler replied truthfully. She deserves it, Susan said with conviction. College is such an important milestone, and we wanted to make sure she felt celebrated and supported as she started this new phase of her life. Tyler nodded and continued cleaning up, choosing not to point out that his own college graduation was just months away. The selective memory and reasoning that allowed his parents to justify their favoritism was something he'd stopped trying to understand years ago. As the evening wound down, Tyler lay in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and processing the day's events. His phone sat on the nightstand, containing evidence of wealth that would shock his family and perhaps finally force them to see him differently. But Tyler wasn't sure he wanted that kind of recognition. Part of him preferred remaining invisible, building his success in private, answering to no one but himself. Tomorrow he would drive back to Atlanta, back to his modest apartment and his job at the bookstore. His parents would go back to their routines, probably spending the next few weeks talking about Madison's car and her bright future. Meanwhile, Tyler would continue making financial moves that his family couldn't imagine, building a portfolio that grew larger by the day. The question that kept him awake wasn't whether to reveal his wealth, but when and how. Tyler knew that information was power, and right now he held all the cards. His parents saw him as the reliable but unremarkable son who would always manage on his own. Soon, he might choose to show them just how well he'd been managing. But tonight, Tyler was content to let them continue believing their own version of the Henderson family story. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new market movements, and new decisions about how much longer he wanted to remain the invisible son. 3 months had passed since Madison's graduation, and the Henderson family dynamics had settled into their familiar rhythm. Madison was living at home, ostensibly job hunting but spending most of her time enjoying her new car and extended summer vacation. She'd had a few interviews, but nothing that met her standards or, more accurately, nothing that seemed worth giving up her comfortable lifestyle for. Tyler had returned to Atlanta and thrown himself into his final semester of engineering coursework. His portfolio had continued its upward trajectory, now hovering around the $1 million mark. The psychological impact of crossing that threshold had been profound. Tyler was officially a millionaire at 22, a fact that still felt surreal every time he checked his balance. His job prospects were equally impressive. The interview with the Silicon Valley tech company had gone exceptionally well, and they'd extended an offer with a starting salary of $120,000 plus stock options and comprehensive benefits. Tyler had accepted immediately, knowing that the combination of his engineering degree and his cryptocurrency knowledge made him valuable in the emerging field of blockchain technology. But his family remained oblivious to these developments. In their weekly phone calls, his parents asked perfunctory questions about school and expressed vague confidence that he'd figure things out after graduation. The contrast with their daily conversations about Madison's job search, complete with strategy sessions and emotional support, was stark as ever. The situation came to a head on a Thursday evening in October. Tyler was in his apartment, working on his senior design project when his phone rang. It was his mother, and her tone immediately put him on alert. "Tyler, we need to talk about Christmas," Susan began without preamble. "Your father and I have been discussing it, and we think it might be better if you made other plans this year." Tyler set down his engineering textbook, giving his full attention to the call. "What do you mean, other plans?" "Well, Madison is going through a really difficult time right now with the job market, and she needs our support. Having family around during the holidays will be important for her emotional well-being. But you know how she gets when she feels like she's being compared to you. It might be better for everyone if you celebrated somewhere else this year." The logic was so twisted that Tyler almost admired its creativity. Madison, who had received every advantage and was currently living rent-free while casually job hunting, needed protection from being around her successful older brother. Tyler, who had worked his way through college and was about to graduate, with honors, was being disinvited from Christmas to spare Madison's feelings. "Mom, I haven't even mentioned my job prospects or school performance around Madison. How exactly am I making her feel bad?" "It's not intentional, honey. But your success in engineering makes her feel insecure about her own path. She's been crying a lot lately about not finding the right opportunity, and having you there might make her feel worse about herself." Tyler looked around his modest apartment, the secondhand furniture, the stack of textbooks he'd bought used, the ramen noodles that constituted dinner more often than he cared to admit. The idea that his presence would make Madison feel bad about her situation was so absurd, it was almost laughable. "Where exactly am I supposed to go for Christmas?" Tyler asked. "I'm sure Jake's family would love to have you. Or maybe you could visit your friend Marcus in Denver. Think of it as an adventure. You're young and independent. This is the perfect time to start new traditions." Tyler realized this wasn't really a request. His parents had made their decision, and they were simply informing him of it. Madison's comfort took priority over his inclusion in family traditions, just as it had taken priority over everything else for the past 22 years. "Fine," Tyler said quietly. "I'll make other plans." "Oh, good. I'm so glad you understand. You've always been so mature about these things. This is exactly why we know you'll do great in life. You're adaptable and independent." After hanging up, Tyler sat in his apartment feeling a familiar mixture of anger and resignation. But this time, something was different. The anger was cleaner, sharper, unencumbered by the desperate hope for recognition that had colored his emotions for years. Tyler realized he was done seeking his parents' approval or inclusion. They'd made their priorities clear, and it was time for him to act accordingly. Over the next few weeks, Tyler began making plans that extended far beyond Christmas. He started researching apartments in San Francisco, planning his move for after graduation. He opened new investment accounts, diversifying his portfolio beyond cryptocurrency into traditional stocks and real estate investment trusts. Most importantly, he began emotionally distancing himself from his family's opinion of him. The process was liberating in ways Tyler hadn't expected. Without the constant underlying hope that his parents might eventually recognize his achievements, he could focus entirely on his own goals and ambitions. His grades improved even further. His job preparation became more focused, and his investment strategies became more sophisticated. Meanwhile, Madison's job search was yielding predictable results. She'd turned down several entry-level positions that she deemed beneath her potential, holding out for something that matched her self-perception rather than her qualifications. Her parents supported this approach, assuring her that the right opportunity would come along and that she shouldn't settle for anything less than she deserved. Tyler learned about Madison's job market struggles through overheard phone conversations, and his parents' increasingly frequent complaints about the terrible economy and employers who don't appreciate quality candidates. The irony that Tyler had already secured an excellent position straight out of college was lost on them, mainly because they'd never bothered to ask about his prospects. In November, Tyler's portfolio hit a new milestone, $1.2 million. The achievement felt different from previous gains because it coincided with his emotional detachment from his family's validation. Tyler was building wealth not to prove anything to his parents, but because he genuinely enjoyed the intellectual challenge and the financial independence it provided. His graduation was scheduled for December 15th, just 10 days before Christmas. Tyler had initially planned to invite his parents, despite their track record of missing his important events. But after the Christmas conversation, he decided against it. Instead, he invited Jake, Marcus, and a few other close friends. His real family, he realized, were the people who had actually supported him through college. 2 weeks before graduation, Tyler received an unexpected call from his father. Robert's tone was uncharacteristically serious as he explained the reason for his call. "Tyler, we need your help with something," Robert began. "Madison's car has some mechanical issues, and the repair estimate is pretty steep. The dealership is saying it needs a new transmission, which would cost about $8,000. Tyler was quiet, waiting for his father to continue. "The problem is, we're stretched pretty thin financially right now. Between Madison's living expenses and some unexpected house repairs, we don't have that kind of money readily available. We were hoping you might be able to help us out." The request was staggering in its audacity. The same parents who had told Tyler he couldn't expect graduation gifts because they were financially strained were now asking him, a college student working part-time, to help pay for Madison's car repairs. "Dad, I'm a college student working at a bookstore. How exactly do you think I have $8,000? "Well, you've always been good with money, and we thought maybe you'd saved something from your job. We'd pay you back, of course, once our finances stabilize." Tyler almost laughed. His parents genuinely believed that his bookstore wages could cover their financial emergencies, while simultaneously believing he didn't deserve their financial support. The cognitive dissonance was breathtaking. "I don't have that kind of money," Tyler said, which was technically true. He didn't have it in his checking account. "Are you sure? Maybe you could take out a student loan or something? Madison really needs her car for job interviews." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Robert becoming increasingly desperate and Tyler becoming increasingly amazed at his father's assumptions. Finally, Tyler ended the call with a promise to think about it, though he had no intention of helping fund Madison's lifestyle. That evening, Tyler made a decision that would change everything. He called his parents back, but this time he had a different kind of conversation in mind. "Dad, I've been thinking about our earlier conversation," Tyler began. "You're right that Madison needs reliable transportation for job interviews. But I think there might be a better solution than expensive repairs on a luxury car." "What do you mean?" "Well, Madison could get a reliable used car for much less than $8,000. A Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla would be perfect for job hunting and much more economical to maintain." Robert's tone immediately became defensive. "Tyler, Madison can't drive around in some old beater. She has a certain image to maintain, especially when she's interviewing for professional positions. Dad, I drove a 10-year-old Honda through college, and it never hurt my job prospects. In fact, most employers respect candidates who are practical and financially responsible. That's different. You're in engineering. People expect you to be more utilitarian. Madison is going into communications and marketing. Appearance matters in those fields." Tyler realized this conversation perfectly encapsulated his family's worldview. Madison deserved luxury and image maintenance, while Tyler deserved utility and practicality. Madison's comfort was a family priority, while Tyler's needs were his own responsibility. "I understand your perspective, Dad, but I want you to understand mine too. You're asking me, a college student, to help pay for repairs on a car that costs more than most people make in a year. Meanwhile, you've never offered to help me with any of my expenses. Tyler, that's not fair. You've never needed our help the way Madison does. Have you ever asked if I needed help? Have you ever wondered how I've managed to pay for everything on my own?" Robert was quiet for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "You've always been so independent. We assumed you preferred handling things yourself." Tyler realized this was his moment, not to reveal his wealth, but to finally articulate years of frustration and disappointment. "Dad, I didn't choose to be independent. I learned to be independent because I had to be. Every time I needed something, I was told to figure it out myself. Every achievement I made was ignored or minimized. Every time Madison wanted something, it became a family priority. I adapted to your expectations, but that doesn't mean I preferred them." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for almost a minute. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice subdued. Tyler, I had no idea you felt this way. Your mother and I always thought you appreciated being treated like an adult. There's a difference between being treated like an adult and being treated like you don't matter, Tyler replied. Madison is treated like a beloved child who deserves support and encouragement. I'm treated like a distant relative who should be grateful for minimal attention. Tyler could hear his father breathing heavily, processing this confrontation. It was the first time Tyler had ever directly challenged his parents' treatment of him, and Robert seemed genuinely shocked by the conversation. What do you want from us, Tyler? It was a fair question, and Tyler realized he had a choice to make. He could continue this conversation with his full honesty, revealing not just his emotional state, but his financial success. Or he could maintain his privacy while establishing new boundaries. Tyler chose a middle path. I want you to understand that your assumptions about me are wrong. I'm not some robot who doesn't need family support or recognition. I'm not less deserving of your attention just because I've learned to succeed without it. And I'm definitely not your backup financial plan when Madison's lifestyle becomes expensive. The conversation ended with Robert promising to discuss things with Susan and to reconsider how we've been handling family dynamics. Tyler didn't expect meaningful change, but he felt better for having finally spoken his truth. What Tyler didn't know was that this conversation had planted a seed of curiosity in his father's mind. For the first time, Robert began wondering about Tyler's actual financial situation and how his son had managed to seem so financially stable throughout college. That curiosity would soon lead to discoveries that would shatter the Henderson family's understanding of who Tyler really was. Robert Henderson couldn't shake the conversation he'd had with Tyler. For 3 days, his son's words echoed in his mind, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his parenting that he'd spent years avoiding. The accusation that Tyler had been treated like a distant relative stung, because when Robert examined his behavior honestly, he couldn't deny its accuracy. Susan had been defensive when Robert brought up Tyler's concerns. He's being dramatic, she'd insisted. Tyler has always been fine with our arrangements. He's never complained before. But Robert remembered Tyler's voice during that phone call, not angry or whining, but tired and resigned in a way that suggested years of accumulated disappointment. The realization that his son had been quietly suffering while he and Susan celebrated Madison's every minor achievement was deeply unsettling. What bothered Robert most was Tyler's comment about financial assumptions. Robert had always assumed Tyler was getting by adequately on his bookstore wages and student loans, but he'd never actually asked for details. Now he found himself wondering how Tyler had managed to seem so financially stable while working part-time and attending school full-time. Madison's car situation had deteriorated further. The transmission had completely failed, leaving the BMW undrivable and Madison stranded at home. The dealership had increased their repair estimate to $12,000 after discovering additional problems, and Madison was having daily emotional breakdowns about being trapped without transportation. I can't even go to job interviews, Madison sobbed to her parents over breakfast. How am I supposed to build a career if I can't get anywhere? Robert found himself thinking about Tyler's suggestion regarding a reliable used car, though he didn't dare voice it in front of Madison. The logic was sound. A dependable Honda or Toyota would solve the transportation problem for far less money than repairing the BMW. But Madison's reaction to that suggestion would be nuclear, and Robert wasn't prepared for that conversation. Instead, he found himself researching Tyler's financial situation in ways that felt invasive but necessary. He started with Tyler's social media accounts, looking for clues about his lifestyle and spending habits. What he found was puzzling. Tyler's Instagram showed the same modest apartment, the same old clothes, the same beat-up Honda Civic he'd been driving since high school. There were no signs of financial stress, but also no signs of hidden wealth. Robert's curiosity deepened when he remembered Tyler's confident tone during their conversation. His son hadn't sounded like someone struggling to make ends meet. He'd sounded like someone who had options but was choosing not to exercise them. The distinction was subtle but significant. On Friday evening, Robert made a decision that would change everything. He called his brother-in-law Marcus, who worked in banking, and asked what seemed like a casual question. Marcus, hypothetically, speaking if someone wanted to check on their adult child's financial situation, how would they go about that? Marcus was immediately suspicious. "Rob, please tell me you're not thinking about snooping on Tyler's bank account. That's a massive violation of privacy, not to mention potentially illegal." "I'm not talking about snooping," Robert said, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was talking about. "I'm just concerned about how he's managing financially, and he's not very forthcoming about it." "Have you tried asking him directly?" Robert realized he'd never actually asked Tyler about his finances beyond vague inquiries about whether he was doing okay. The assumption that Tyler would volunteer information if he needed help had been so ingrained that Robert had never considered direct questioning. "Look, Rob," Marcus continued, "if you're worried about Tyler, the solution is communication, not investigation. Talk to your son like an adult instead of trying to detective work his life." After hanging up with Marcus, Robert felt foolish but not deterred. Something about Tyler's recent behavior suggested layers that Robert had never bothered to explore. His son's calm confidence during their confrontational phone call, his apparent financial stability despite minimal income, his emotional distance from family celebrations, all of it pointed to a Tyler that Robert didn't really know. Saturday morning brought a breakthrough that Robert hadn't expected. Susan was cleaning out old files when she discovered a folder labeled Tyler College Documents that contained paperwork from Tyler's freshman year. Among the documents was a financial aid form that Tyler had filled out independently, listing his income sources and expenses. "Robert, look at this," Susan called from the home office. "I found some of Tyler's old college paperwork. Did you know he applied for financial aid without telling us?" Robert examined the documents, noting Tyler's meticulous record-keeping and the detailed budget he'd created for his college expenses. What struck him most was a handwritten note in Tyler's familiar script. "Emergency fund goal, $5,000 by sophomore year. Investment research, cryptocurrency, index funds, real estate opportunities." "Investment research?" Robert read aloud. "Susan, did you know Tyler was interested in investing?" Susan shrugged. "He's always been interested in numbers and computers. I assumed it was just academic curiosity." But Robert's business background told him otherwise. The note wasn't academic, it was strategic. Tyler had been planning financial moves as a college freshman, thinking about emergency funds and investment opportunities while most students were focused on parties and social activities. Robert's investigation took on new urgency. He spent Sunday afternoon researching cryptocurrency and investment strategies, trying to understand what Tyler might have been doing with his money. What he learned was eye-opening. Students who had invested in cryptocurrency during Tyler's freshman year could have seen massive returns by now. The more Robert researched, the more questions he had. If Tyler had been investing since freshman year, if he'd been as strategic about money as his notes suggested, if he'd caught even a fraction of the cryptocurrency boom that had made headlines over the past few years, then Tyler's financial situation might be very different from what his parents assumed. Monday morning, Robert made a decision that crossed ethical lines but felt necessary for his peace of mind. He called Tyler's bank, claiming to be helping his son with financial planning and asking general questions about account types and services. The customer service representative was helpful, but limited in what she could share without Tyler's explicit consent. "I can tell you that we offer several premium services for high net worth individuals," the representative mentioned. "If your son is interested in investment management or private banking services, he would need to schedule a consultation directly." Robert's heart skipped. What qualifies someone for private banking services? Typically, clients need to maintain minimum balances in the mid-six-figure range, though specific requirements vary by institution. After hanging up, Robert sat in stunned silence. The bank representative's casual mention of high net worth individuals and mid-six-figure balances didn't align with his image of Tyler as a struggling college student. Either the representative had been mistaken about Tyler's account status, or Robert had been drastically wrong about his son's financial situation. That evening, Robert's curiosity reached a breaking point. He called Tyler directly, abandoning subtlety in favor of direct questioning. "Tyler, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. How are you really doing financially?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you actually struggling to pay your bills, or have you been managing better than we thought?" Another pause. "Dad, why are you asking?" Robert decided on honesty. "Because I've been thinking about our conversation last week and I realized I don't actually know anything about your financial situation. I've been making assumptions, and I'm starting to think those assumptions might be wrong." Tyler's laugh was dry and humorless. "They're definitely wrong." "What does that mean?" "It means I haven't been struggling, Dad. I haven't needed your help because I've been helping myself." Robert's pulse quickened. "How have you been helping yourself?" "Through investments, primarily. I started researching cryptocurrency and blockchain technology during my sophomore year. I've been building a portfolio ever since." The casual way Tyler mentioned having an investment portfolio made Robert's head spin. "Tyler, how much money are we talking about?" "Enough. That's not an answer." Tyler sighed. "Dad, I'm not comfortable discussing specific numbers over the phone, but I will say this. I don't need you to help pay for Madison's car repairs because I couldn't afford it. I don't need you to help because I choose not to." The implications of Tyler's statement hit Robert like a physical blow. His son wasn't financially struggling. He was financially independent. More than independent, apparently. Tyler had been building wealth while Robert and Susan had been treating him like a charity case who should be grateful for minimal attention. "Tyler, how long have you been financially stable?" "Define stability." "How long have you had significant savings?" "Since junior year." Robert did quick math. Tyler was currently a senior, which meant he'd been financially secure for at least a year, possibly longer. During that entire time, Robert and Susan had been explaining their favoritism toward Madison by claiming Tyler was independent and didn't need help. "Son, I think we need to have a serious conversation. Can you come home this weekend?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I think we're past the point where a family conversation is going." "To fix anything? What do you mean?" "I mean that you're only interested in my financial situation now because you think I might have money. For 22 years, you didn't care about my achievements, my struggles, or my successes. Now that you suspect I might be wealthy, suddenly, you want to have serious conversations." Robert felt his face flush with shame because Tyler's assessment was accurate. His newfound interest in his son's life had been triggered by curiosity about money, not genuine parental concern. "Tyler, that's not fair, isn't it?" "Dad, when was the last time you asked about my grades? When was the last time you asked about my job prospects? When was the last time you attended any event that was important to me?" Robert couldn't answer because he couldn't remember. Tyler's achievements had been so consistently overshadowed by Madison's needs that Robert had stopped paying attention to his son's life entirely. "I graduate in 3 weeks," Tyler continued. "I already have a job lined up in Silicon Valley, starting in January. I'll be making more money than you and Mom combined. And you know what? None of that matters to me anymore because I've learned to succeed without your recognition or support." The conversation ended with Tyler hanging up, leaving Robert staring at his phone in shock. His son, the son he'd dismissed as competent but unremarkable, was about to graduate with honors, had secured a high-paying job. and had apparently built significant wealth through his own initiative and intelligence. Robert walked into the living room where Susan and Madison were watching television, Madison still complaining about her transportation situation. He looked at his wife and daughter, then thought about Tyler sitting alone in his Atlanta apartment, preparing for graduation without any family support. "Susan, we need to talk," Robert said quietly. "What about?" "About Tyler. About everything we've gotten wrong." Susan looked confused, but Robert's expression convinced her to follow him to the kitchen where they could speak privately. "I just talked to Tyler," Robert began. "We've made a terrible mistake. Actually, we've made years of terrible mistakes." As Robert explained his conversation with Tyler, Susan's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to horror. The revelation that Tyler was financially successful, professionally accomplished, and emotionally distant from his family because of their treatment crystallized years of poor parenting decisions into a moment of devastating clarity. "How much money do you think he has?" Susan asked, which Robert realized was exactly the wrong question to focus on. "Susan, that's not the point. The point is that we've been treating our son like he doesn't matter, and now we've lost him." But even as Robert said those words, he wasn't sure they were entirely true. Part of him was indeed focused on Tyler's financial success, wondering how his overlooked son had managed to build wealth while his favored daughter couldn't even maintain a functioning car. The next morning brought a decision that would force the Henderson family to confront their dysfunction directly. Robert decided to do something he'd never done before. He was going to Tyler's graduation, whether Tyler wanted him there or not. More importantly, he was going to demand the full truth about Tyler's financial situation, not out of curiosity, but because he needed to understand the extent of his parental failures. What Robert didn't realize was that Tyler had already made his own decision about how much truth his family could handle. The graduation ceremony would indeed be a revelation, but not in the way Robert expected. Tyler's graduation ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. on December 15th at Georgia Tech's McCamish Pavilion. Despite Tyler's clear indication that he didn't want his family there, Robert had made the 4-hour drive from their hometown to Atlanta, bringing Susan along despite her protests that they were intruding where they weren't wanted. Madison had stayed home, claiming she couldn't handle the emotional stress of a family confrontation while dealing with her transportation crisis. Robert suspected the real reason was that Madison sensed the family dynamic was shifting in ways that wouldn't favor her, and she preferred to avoid potential conflict. Robert and Susan arrived at Georgia Tech's campus 90 minutes before the CI ceremony, giving them time to locate Tyler beforehand. Robert had called Tyler's roommate Jake the previous evening, explaining that he needed to see his son before graduation and asking for help arranging a meeting. Jake had been reluctant, but ultimately agreed to facilitate a conversation, mainly because he'd witnessed Tyler's frustration with his family for years and thought a confrontation might be therapeutic. He'd arranged to meet Robert and Susan at the campus coffee shop at 8:30 a.m. When Robert and Susan walked into the coffee shop, they immediately spotted Jake sitting at a corner table with Tyler. Both young men looked tense, and Tyler's expression became distinctly unwelcoming when he saw his parents approaching. "Tyler," Robert began, but his son held up a hand to stop him. "Dad, I told you I didn't want you here today. This is my graduation, and I wanted to celebrate it with people who actually care about my achievements." The comment stung, but Robert pressed forward. "Son, we do care about your achievements. That's exactly why we're here." Tyler's laugh was bitter. "You care about my achievements now that you think they might involve money. That's not the same thing as caring about me." Susan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Tyler, that's not fair. We've always cared about you." "Really, Mom? When was the last time you asked about my grades? When was the last time you attended anything that was important to me? When was the last time you treated me like I mattered as much as Madison?" Susan opened her mouth to respond but realized she couldn't answer any of those questions satisfactorily. The pattern Tyler was describing was undeniable once examined honestly. Jake, sensing the conversation needed direction, cleared his throat. Tyler, maybe you should tell them about your job offer. They might be surprised. Tyler shot Jake a look. That clearly said, stay out of this. But Jake continued anyway. Your parents think you're struggling financially, right? Maybe it's time they knew the truth. Robert leaned forward eagerly. Tyler, Jake mentioned you have a job lined up. What? Kind of position? Tyler sighed, recognizing that this conversation was inevitable. I'm starting as a blockchain engineer at Nexus Technologies in San Francisco in January. The base salary is $120,000, with stock options and comprehensive benefits. Robert's eyes widened. $120,000 was more than he made after 20 years in middle management. Tyler would be earning that amount straight out of college at age 22. That's excellent, son. Congratulations. Thank you, Tyler replied coolly. I accepted the offer 3 months ago. I've already found an apartment in San Francisco and made arrangements for the move. I didn't mention it because you never asked about my job prospects. Susan looked stricken. Tyler, we assumed you'd tell us when you had news to share. The same way I told you about making Dean's List 3 semesters in a row? The same way I told you about winning the engineering department's Innovation Award? The same way I told you about my senior design project being selected for the state competition? Robert and Susan exchanged glances. They had no memory of Tyler sharing any of these achievements, mainly because they'd never created space in family conversations for Tyler's accomplishments. Son, Robert said carefully, it sounds like you've been very successful in college. We're proud of you. Tyler's expression hardened. Dad, you're proud of me now because you're impressed by my salary. You weren't proud when I was actually earning these achievements. Jake decided to push the conversation further. Tyler, tell them about your other success, the one you've been keeping secret. Tyler shot Jake another warning look, but Jake pressed on. They're going to find out eventually. Might as well be now. Robert's curiosity spiked. What other success? Tyler was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with whether to reveal information he'd kept private for years. Finally, he pulled out his phone and opened his portfolio app. Dad, you asked me how I've been managing financially. The truth is, I haven't just been managing. I've been thriving. Tyler turned his phone screen toward his parents, showing them a balance that made both Robert and Susan gasp audibly. The number displayed was $1,347,892. Tyler, Susan whispered. Is that real? It's real. I've been investing in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology since my sophomore year. This represents 3 years of research, strategic planning, and calculated risk-taking. Robert stared at the phone screen, trying to process what he was seeing. His son, the son he'd dismissed as competent but unremarkable, was sitting across from him with over $1.3 million in investments. How? Robert managed to ask. Tyler put his phone away and looked directly at his father. I did exactly what you always told me to do, Dad. I worked hard, saved money, and invested wisely. The difference is, I did it without any help or encouragement from you. The implications were staggering. While Robert and Susan had been worrying about Tyler's financial future and using his supposed independence as justification for favoring Madison, Tyler had been building wealth that exceeded anything his parents had ever achieved. Tyler, Susan said slowly, if you have this much money, why didn't you help us with Madison's car? The question revealed so much about Susan's worldview that Tyler almost laughed. Even faced with evidence of his success, her first thought was how it could benefit Madison. Mom, I didn't help with Madison's car for the same reason you didn't help with my college expenses, because it's not my responsibility. But your family, Susan protested. Exactly. I'm family. But for 22 years, you've treated me like I'm not really part of this family. You've made it clear that Madison is your priority, and I'm just someone who happens to live in the same house. Now you want me to financially support the sister who got everything while I got nothing? Robert was beginning to understand the depth of damage their favoritism had caused. Tyler, we never meant to make you feel excluded from the family. Dad, intentions don't matter. Actions matter. And your actions have consistently shown that Madison's wants are more important than my needs, that her comfort is more valuable than my achievements, and that her future matters more than my present. Jake, who had been watching this family drama unfold, decided to add context that Tyler wouldn't provide for himself. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, do you want to know how Tyler built this wealth? He worked 25 hours a week at the bookstore, lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, wore the same clothes for 4 years, and invested every spare dollar he could find. While Madison was posting Instagram pictures from spring, break trips you funded, Tyler was researching blockchain protocols and analyzing market trends. Susan looked stricken. Tyler, we didn't know you were struggling with food and clothes. I wasn't struggling, Mom. I was prioritizing. I chose to live modestly so I could invest aggressively. The difference is, I made those choices myself instead of having them forced on me by parents who didn't care enough to help. Robert felt a wave of shame as he processed Tyler's words. His son had displayed exactly the kind of discipline and strategic thinking that Robert claimed to value, but Robert had been too focused on Madison to notice or appreciate it. Son, what can we do to fix this? Tyler considered the question carefully. Dad, you can't fix 22 years of favoritism with one conversation. You can't undo the damage of making me feel like I don't matter to you. But we can try, Susan said desperately. We can do better going forward. Tyler looked at his parents with an expression that was more sad than angry. Mom, you're only interested in doing better now because you discovered I'm wealthy. If my portfolio showed $100 instead of over $1 million, would you be here having this conversation? Susan couldn't answer because they all knew the truth. Robert's investigation into Tyler's finances had been triggered by curiosity about money, not concern for his son's well-being. Tyler, Robert said quietly, you're right. We've failed you as parents. We got so focused on Madison's needs that we forgot you had needs too. We took your competence for granted and assumed you didn't want our support. Dad, I always wanted your support. I wanted you to care about my grades, attend my events, ask about my dreams and goals. I wanted to feel like I mattered to you as much as Madison does. Instead, I learned to succeed without you because I had to. Jake checked his watch and interrupted the conversation. Tyler, we need to head to the pavilion. The ceremony starts in 45 minutes. Tyler stood up, adjusting his cap and gown. Mom, Dad, I'm glad you came today, even though I told you not to. I'm glad you finally know the truth about my life. But I need you to understand that knowing the truth doesn't automatically fix our relationship. Robert and Susan also stood, both looking uncertain about their next move. Can we at least attend your graduation? Robert asked. Tyler considered this for a moment. Yes, you can attend, but I want you to understand something. I'm not graduating as your overlooked son who finally succeeded despite your neglect. I'm graduating as a successful adult who built his achievements independently. The difference matters. As they walked toward the graduation venue, Robert found himself looking at Tyler with new eyes. This wasn't the compliant, forgettable son he'd dismissed for years. This was a confident, accomplished young man who had built wealth and secured professional success through his own intelligence and determination. The graduation ceremony itself was surreal for Robert and Susan. They watched Tyler walk across the stage to receive his engineering degree, this time understanding the magnitude of what he'd accomplished. When Tyler's name was called with the additional recognition of summa cum laude, Robert felt a mixture of pride and regret that was almost overwhelming. After the ceremony, Tyler introduced his parents to his friends and professors, many of whom were clearly impressed by Tyler's achievements and prospects. Robert listened to these conversations with growing amazement at how little he'd known about his son's college experience. Dr. Patricia Williams, Tyler's senior advisor, pulled Robert aside during the reception. "Mr. Henderson, I hope you know how exceptional your son is. Tyler is one of the most talented students I've worked with in 15 years of teaching. His senior design project has potential commercial applications, and several companies have already expressed interest in licensing his work." Robert thanked Dr. Williams while feeling increasingly small. His son's professors knew Tyler better than he did. Tyler's friends understood his achievements better than his own parents did. The realization that he'd been absent from the most important years of Tyler's development was crushing. As the reception wound down, Tyler approached his parents with an expression that was difficult to read. "Mom, Dad, I want you to know that, despite everything, I don't hate you. I'm not trying to punish you by being successful. I just want you to understand that your approval or recognition can't retroactively validate achievements you ignored when they were happening." Susan was crying now, finally grasping the full impact of their parental failures. "Tyler, what can we do? How can we be better parents to you?" Tyler looked at his mother with genuine compassion. "Mom, you can start by treating me like I matter, not because I have money, not because I'm successful, but because I'm your son and I've always deserved your love and attention." The conversation was interrupted by Jake, who reminded Tyler that they had dinner reservations with friends to celebrate his graduation. As Tyler prepared to leave with his chosen family of friends, Robert realized this might be his last chance to say something meaningful. "Tyler, I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that I see you now. I see your achievements, your character, and your success. I'm proud of the man you've become, even though I wasn't there to help you become him." Tyler paused, considering his father's words. "Dad, I appreciate that, but I need you to understand that being proud of my success isn't the same as being a good parent. Madison got your support during her journey. I only got your pride after I'd already arrived at my destination." With that, Tyler walked away with his friends, leaving Robert and Susan standing alone in the parking lot, finally understanding the full cost of their favoritism and neglect. The drive home from Tyler's graduation was the longest 4 hours of Robert and Susan Henderson's marriage. They sat in uncomfortable silence for the first hour, both processing the magnitude of what they'd learned about their son and themselves. When Susan finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Robert, we destroyed our relationship with our own child." Robert gripped the steering wheel tighter, unable to argue with his wife's assessment. The image of Tyler's portfolio balance was burned into his mind, but more disturbing was the memory of Tyler's expression when he'd shown it to them. Not pride or excitement, but resignation and disappointment that his parents only cared about his achievements once they involved money. "How did we not know?" Susan continued. "How did we not see what was happening right in front of us?" Robert had been asking himself the same question. Tyler had been living in their house for 18 years, attending the same family dinners, participating in the same conversations. Yet somehow, Robert had never truly seen his son, never understood his intelligence, his ambition, or his potential. "We saw what we expected to see," Robert admitted. "We decided Tyler was self-sufficient and Madison needed help, and then we only looked for evidence that supported that narrative." Susan turned to stare out the passenger window at the passing landscape. "Do you realize that Tyler is going to make more money in his first year of work than we make combined? And he already has more savings than we've accumulated in 25 years of marriage." The financial comparison was staggering, but Robert recognized it wasn't the most important issue. "Susan, the money isn't the point. The point is that we failed to support our son when he needed us, and now we've lost him." "Have we lost him?" Susan asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Robert thought about Tyler's parting words at the graduation reception. His son had been clear, Recognition after success wasn't the same as support during struggle. Tyler had needed his parents' encouragement during college, their interest in his achievements, their presence at his milestones. Instead, he'd gotten neglect justified by assumptions about his independence. When they arrived home, Madison was waiting in the living room with an expectant expression. "How was the graduation? Did you talk to Tyler about helping with my car?" Their question demonstrated such a complete misunderstanding of the situation that Robert almost laughed. Madison genuinely believed that Tyler's graduation ceremony was somehow related to her transportation problems. "Madison, we need to have a family meeting," Robert said, sinking into his chair with exhaustion. Over the next hour, Robert and Susan explained to Madison what they'd learned about Tyler's financial success and professional prospects. Madison's reactions revealed the depth of her self-centeredness and the extent to which her parents had enabled it. "Wait, Tyler has over $1 million and he won't help me fix my car?" Madison asked incredulously. "That's so selfish. We're family. He should want to help me." Susan tried to explain Tyler's perspective, but Madison wasn't interested in understanding her brother's feelings. She was focused on what Tyler's wealth meant for her own comfort and convenience. "I don't understand why he's being so dramatic," Madison continued. "So what if you guys supported me more? I needed more help than he did. He's always been good at school and responsible with money. I've had to work harder to figure things out." Robert realized that Madison's worldview had been shaped by years of preferential treatment that had convinced her she deserved special consideration. In her mind, Tyler's success was evidence that he'd never needed help, rather than evidence of what he'd accomplished despite not receiving it. "Madison," Robert said carefully, "Tyler succeeded because he had to, not because it was easy for him. We failed to give him the support and encouragement that every child deserves." "But he turned out fine," Madison protested. "Obviously, he didn't need our help if he's rich now." The circular logic was exactly what Tyler had been fighting against his entire life. His success was being used to justify the neglect that had forced him to become successful in the first place. Susan tried a different approach. "Madison, imagine if we had ignored all your achievements, never attended your events, and told you to figure everything out yourself. How would that have made you feel?" Madison considered this for about 30 seconds before responding. "But that's different. Tyler is naturally good at things. I need more encouragement and support." Robert realized that Madison's sense of entitlement was so deeply ingrained that she couldn't recognize the unfairness of their family dynamic even when it was explicitly explained to her. Years of being treated as the special child had convinced her that she actually was more deserving of attention and resources. The conversation with Madison crystallized something important for Robert. Tyler hadn't just been neglected, he'd been forced to watch his parents lavish attention and resources on a sibling who took that treatment for granted. The psychological impact of that dynamic was probably more damaging than the material disadvantages Tyler had faced. Over the following days, Robert found himself obsessively researching Tyler's achievements that he'd missed or ignored. He discovered that Tyler had been featured in the engineering department newsletter for his innovative work on blockchain applications. He found articles about Tyler's senior design project, which had won recognition at a statewide competition. He learned that Tyler had been offered research positions and graduate school opportunities that he'd turned down in favor of his Silicon Valley job. Each discovery felt like a knife to Robert's conscience. Tyler had been exceptional throughout college, but Robert had been too focused on Madison's routine struggles to notice his son's extraordinary achievements. Susan was conducting her own research, going through old family photos and videos. What she found was equally disturbing: countless images of Madison's events and celebrations, with Tyler present but clearly peripheral. In photo after photo, Tyler stood slightly apart from the family group, smiling politely but not genuinely engaged. "Robert, look at this," Susan called, showing him a video from Madison's high school graduation party. Watch Tyler in the background." Robert watched as the camera focused on Madison opening gifts and giving speeches. Tyler was visible in several shots, but he looked like a spectator at someone else's celebration rather than a participating family member. "We did this to him," Susan said, her voice thick with regret. "We made him an outsider in his own family." The week after Tyler's graduation brought additional revelations about the extent of their son's success. Tyler's story had been featured in Georgia Tech's alumni magazine, highlighting his academic achievements and professional prospects. The article mentioned that Tyler had already received multiple job offers and had chosen Nexus Technologies based on their commitment to blockchain innovation. Robert read the article with growing amazement at how accomplished his son had become. The Tyler described in the magazine was confident, articulate, and visionary, qualities that Robert had never recognized or encouraged in his own child. Meanwhile, Madison's situation continued to deteriorate. Without reliable transportation, her job search had stalled completely. She'd missed several interviews due to car problems, and her emotional state was becoming increasingly volatile. Every conversation somehow circled back to Tyler's wealth and his refusal to help her. "I can't believe my own brother won't help me when he has so much money," Madison complained daily. "What's the point of having a wealthy family member if they won't share?" Robert tried to explain that Tyler's reluctance to help wasn't about money. It was about years of feeling unvalued and unsupported. But Madison couldn't see past her immediate needs to understand the broader context of family dynamics. 2 weeks after the graduation, Robert made a decision that surprised even himself. He called Tyler directly, not to ask for money or to justify past behavior, but to apologize sincerely and to ask what he could do to rebuild their relationship. "Tyler, I've been thinking about our conversation at your graduation, and I need to tell you something. I'm sorry. Not just for the recent problems, but for 22 years of not seeing you clearly." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, I appreciate the apology, but I need you to understand that saying sorry doesn't automatically fix everything. I know that, but I want you to know that I'm trying to understand what I did wrong and how to do better." "What have you figured out?" Robert had prepared for this question. "I figured out that I treated you like you were less important than Madison because you didn't demand attention the way she did. I mistook your competence for not needing support, and I used your independence as an excuse to focus on Madison's drama." Tyler sounded genuinely surprised by his father's insight. "That's actually pretty accurate. Tyler, I also realized something else. I've been proud of your success, but I was never proud of your effort. I saw the results but never acknowledged the work you put in to achieve them." "Dad, that means a lot to hear you say that." Robert felt encouraged by Tyler's response. "Son, I know I can't undo the past, but I want to understand your life better. Can you tell me about your job, about your plans, about things that matter to you?" For the first time in years, Tyler began sharing details about his life with his father. He talked about his excitement about working in blockchain technology, his plans for his move to San Francisco, and his long-term career goals. Robert listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering encouragement. The conversation lasted over an hour, and by the end, Robert felt like he was finally getting to know his son as an adult. Tyler was articulate, passionate, and forward-thinking in ways that Robert had never appreciated. "Tyler, can I ask you something? What would it take for us to have a real relationship? Not just polite family conversations, but an actual father-son connection?" Tyler considered the question carefully. "Dad, I need you to see me as someone who deserves your attention and support, not just as someone who's convenient to ignore because I don't cause problems. I need you to be interested in my life because you care about me, not because you're impressed by my success." "I can do that," Robert replied. "I want to do that. Dad, there's something else. I need you to understand that rebuilding our relationship doesn't mean I'm going to start supporting Madison financially. She's an adult, and her problems aren't my responsibility. Robert had expected this topic to arise. Tyler, I understand that. Your mother and I created this situation with Madison by enabling her dependence. It's not fair to expect you to solve problems we created. What are you going to do about Madison? Robert sighed. We're going to have to stop enabling her and start requiring her to solve her own problems. It's going to be difficult, but it's necessary. After hanging up with Tyler, Robert found Susan in the kitchen and shared the conversation with her. Susan was encouraged by Tyler's willingness to rebuild their relationship, but worried about the implications for Madison. Robert, if we stop supporting Madison the way we have been, she's going to struggle. She's not prepared for real independence. Susan, that's exactly the point. We've crippled Madison by not teaching her to be self-sufficient. Tyler learned independence because we forced it on him. Now we need to help Madison learn the same skills. The conversation with Tyler had given Robert clarity about what needed to change in their family. Madison needed to learn responsibility and self-reliance, while Tyler needed to feel valued and supported. The process would be difficult and painful, but Robert finally understood that genuine love sometimes required tough decisions. That evening, Robert and Susan sat Madison down for a difficult conversation about her future and their expectations for her independence. Madison's reaction was explosive, but Robert and Susan held firm. For the first time in Madison's life, her parents were requiring her to take responsibility for her own problems. Meanwhile, Tyler was in his apartment in Atlanta, packing for his move to San Francisco and planning his new life. His portfolio had continued to grow, now approaching $1.5 million, and his job at Nexus Technologies was scheduled to begin in just 3 weeks. For the first time in years, Tyler felt optimistic about his relationship with his parents. The conversation with his father had been encouraging, suggesting that genuine change might be possible. Tyler wasn't ready to trust completely, but he was willing to give his parents a chance to prove they could do better. The Henderson family was finally confronting the truth about their dysfunction, and each member was being forced to adapt to new realities. The process would be long and difficult, but for the first time, there was hope that they might eventually become the family Tyler had always wanted them to be. 6 months had passed since Tyler's graduation revelation, and the ICE Henderson family landscape had transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Tyler was now settled in San Francisco, 3 months into his position at Nexus Technologies, where his blockchain expertise had quickly established him as a rising star in the company's innovation division. His apartment in the Mission District was a far cry from his cramped college accommodations. The 1-bedroom unit featured floor-to-ceiling windows, modern appliances, and enough space for a proper home office where Tyler continued his cryptocurrency research and trading. His portfolio had grown to nearly $2 million, bolstered by both market gains and his ability to invest a significant portion of his substantial salary. But the most significant change in Tyler's life wasn't financial. It was the gradual rebuilding of his relationship with his father. Robert had kept his promise to show genuine interest in Tyler's life, calling every Sunday not to ask for favors or boast about family news, but to understand his son's world. "Tell me about this project you're working on," Robert said during their weekly call in March. "The one with the supply chain verification." Tyler was initially surprised by his father's detailed questions, but had grown to appreciate Robert's genuine curiosity about blockchain technology and its applications. "We're creating an immutable ledger system that tracks products from manufacturing to consumer delivery. It prevents counterfeiting and ensures authenticity at every step of the supply chain." "That sounds incredibly complex. How did you become so knowledgeable about this technology?" Tyler explained his self-directed learning process, the countless hours of research, and the experimental investments that had taught him to understand market dynamics. Robert listened with the attention he'd never given Tyler's childhood interests, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated he was truly engaged. "Son, I'm amazed by what you've accomplished. Not just the financial success, but the expertise you've developed in such a cutting-edge field." These conversations were healing something in Tyler that he hadn't realized was broken. For the first time in his adult life, he felt seen and appreciated by his father for his intellectual capabilities rather than his practical usefulness. Susan's transformation had been more gradual, but equally significant. She'd begun following Tyler's career through industry publications and had even attended a virtual conference on blockchain technology to better understand her son's work. Her efforts to connect with Tyler's interests felt awkward initially, but her sincerity was unmistakable. "Tyler, I read an article about your company's partnership with that logistics firm," Susan mentioned during one of their conversations. "The journalist said your team's innovation could revolutionize international shipping." Tyler was touched by his mother's effort to understand his professional world. "Mom, that partnership is actually based on technology I helped develop. It's validating to see our work getting recognition in the industry. We never told you how proud we are of your achievements," Susan said quietly. "Not just your success, but your intelligence and innovation. We should have been celebrating your mind instead of taking it for granted." Meanwhile, Madison's journey had been far more turbulent. The withdrawal of her parents' unconditional support had initially triggered a period of intense anger and manipulation. Attempts. She'd accused Robert and Susan of loving Tyler more, of being unfair, of destroying her future prospects. But without the safety net of parental rescue, Madison had been forced to confront practical realities she'd never faced before. Her BMW remained unfixed in the driveway, a daily reminder of her changed circumstances. Instead of the expensive repairs, Madison had used her savings to buy a reliable 2018 Honda Accord, a decision that had felt like a personal defeat at the time, but had proven to be practical and empowering. The car purchase had been Madison's first truly independent financial decision, and the experience had taught her valuable lessons about researching options, negotiating prices, and managing her budget. For the first time in her life, Madison felt pride in solving her own problem rather than having someone else solve it for her. Her job search had also transformed once she'd adjusted her expectations to match her qualifications. Instead of holding out for management positions or high-profile roles, Madison had accepted an entry-level marketing coordinator position at a local nonprofit organization. The salary was modest, but the work was meaningful, and Madison discovered she had genuine talent for social media marketing and community outreach. "I actually enjoy my job," Madison admitted to her parents over dinner one evening. "It's not glamorous, but I'm learning skills and making a real contribution." Robert and Susan exchanged glances, recognizing that this was the first time Madison had expressed genuine satisfaction with work rather than focusing on external validation or status. Madison's relationship with Tyler remained complicated, but it had evolved beyond her initial sense of entitlement to his wealth. During one of Tyler's visits home, she'd approached him with an apology that surprised everyone. "Tyler, I owe you an apology for how I acted when I found out about your success. I was angry that you wouldn't help me, but I understand now that you didn't owe me anything. I'm sorry for expecting you to solve my problems." Tyler had been cautious in accepting the apology, but he appreciated Madison's acknowledgement of the situation. "Madison, I'm glad you're figuring things out for yourself. You're more capable than you've been given credit for. Can I ask you something?" Madison had continued. "How did you learn to be so independent? I feel like I'm starting from scratch at 23. Tyler had spent the next hour sharing practical advice about budgeting, goal setting, and building professional skills. For the first time in their adult lives, the siblings had a conversation based on mutual respect rather than competition for parental attention. By summer, the Henderson family dynamics had stabilized into healthier patterns. Tyler's visits home were more frequent and genuinely enjoyable, with conversations focused on shared interests and mutual respect rather than past grievances. Robert had become genuinely interested in cryptocurrency and had even made some small investments based on Tyler's guidance. "I invested in that Ethereum project you recommended," Robert mentioned during one visit. "I'm up about 30% so far." Tyler smiled at his father's enthusiasm. "Dad, remember what I told you about not investing more than you can afford to lose? The crypto market is volatile." "I'm being careful. But I have to admit, understanding your investment strategy has helped me appreciate what you accomplished even more. The research and discipline required is incredible." Susan had found her own way to connect with Tyler's success by becoming an advocate for financial literacy in their community. She'd started volunteering with a local organization that taught budgeting and investing skills to young adults, often sharing Tyler's story as inspiration for what was possible with early financial planning. "Your mother has become quite the evangelist for cryptocurrency education," Robert told Tyler with amusement. "She's convinced half the neighborhood to start researching blockchain technology." Tyler was touched by his parents' efforts to understand and celebrate his achievements, even years after the fact. The recognition felt different from what he'd imagined as a child. It was based on genuine understanding rather than obligatory pride, and it came from people who had grown enough to appreciate what they'd previously overlooked. Madison's progress continued throughout the summer. She'd received a promotion at work, been accepted into a part-time MBA program, and had started dating someone who appreciated her work ethic and ambitions rather than her family connections. For the first time in her life, Madison was building an identity based on her own accomplishments rather than her parents' support. "I never realized how satisfying it could be to earn things yourself," Madison confided to Tyler during a family barbecue. "I used to think you were crazy for working so hard when you could have asked for help. Now I understand the pride that comes from independence." Tyler nodded, remembering his own journey toward self-reliance. "Madison, you're discovering what I learned in college, that earning your success makes it more meaningful than having it given to you." "Do you think I waited too long to learn this lesson?" Tyler considered the question carefully. "I think everyone learns independence at their own pace. What matters is that you're learning it now." The family barbecue itself was symbolic of how much had changed. Previous family gatherings had been dominated by Madison's latest drama or achievements, with Tyler playing a supporting role. This gathering featured balanced conversations where everyone's interests and accomplishments were discussed equally. Robert shared updates about his work and his new investment hobby. Susan talked about her volunteer work and the success stories from her financial literacy classes. Madison described her job responsibilities and her MBA coursework. Tyler discussed his latest projects at Nexus Technologies and his plans for expanding his real estate investments. For the first time in anyone's memory, the Henderson family dinner table felt like a gathering of equals rather than a performance, designed to celebrate one member at the expense of others. As autumn approaches, Tyler faced a decision that would test the strength of his rebuilt family relationships. Nexus Technologies had offered him a promotion that would require relocating to their Tokyo office for 2 years to lead their Asian expansion into blockchain applications. The opportunity was extraordinary: a significant salary increase, stock options, and leadership experience that would accelerate his career trajectory. Tyler's initial instinct was to accept immediately. The professional opportunity was too good to pass up, and his attachment to San Francisco wasn't particularly strong. But for the first time in his adult life, Tyler found himself considering how his decision would affect his family relationships. He called Robert to discuss the opportunity, something he never would have done a year earlier. "Dad, I wanted to get your thoughts on something. My company has offered me a promotion that would involve moving to Tokyo for 2 years. Robert's response demonstrated how much their relationship had evolved. Instead of offering unsolicited advice or making the Conversation about himself. Robert asked thoughtful questions about Tyler's career goals and personal preferences. Son, this sounds like an incredible opportunity. How do you feel about living in Japan? Tyler appreciated that his father was focusing on his perspective rather than imposing external opinions. I'm excited about the professional challenge and the cultural experience. My only hesitation is that I've just started to rebuild my relationships here. Tyler, if this move is right for your career, you shouldn't let family considerations hold you back. We'll still be here when you return, and we can maintain our connection regardless of geography. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Robert asking about Tyler's long-term plans, his financial goals, and his personal interests. By the end, Tyler felt supported in whatever decision he chose to make. Tyler ultimately accepted the Tokyo position, but not before organizing a family dinner to share his news and discuss how they would maintain their relationships across the distance. I want you all to know that moving to Tokyo doesn't mean I'm running away from our family again, Tyler explained over dinner. I'm making this decision from a position of strength in our relationships, not weakness. Madison surprised everyone by being the most emotional about Tyler's departure. I feel like we just figured out how to be siblings, and now you're moving to the other side of the world. Tyler was touched by Madison's reaction. Madison, we'll stay in touch. And 2 years isn't that long in the grand scheme of things. Can I visit you in Tokyo? Madison asked impulsively. Tyler smiled. I'd like that. You could take some time off from your MBA program and see another part of the world. The idea of Madison visiting Tokyo sparked a broader family conversation about travel and cultural experiences. For the first time, the Hendersons were making plans that included everyone equally, with Tyler's new life serving as a bridge to expand everyone's horizons rather than a source of division. Tyler's departure for Tokyo in September was markedly different from his previous moves. Instead of leaving quietly with minimal family acknowledgement, Tyler's farewell was a celebration attended by his parents, Madison, and several family friends who had come to appreciate Tyler's achievements over the years. Robert gave a speech that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Tyler, we're proud of the man you've become, not just because of your professional success, but because of your character, your intelligence, and your resilience. We failed to support you when you needed us, but you succeeded anyway. Now we're grateful for the chance to celebrate you properly. Tyler's response was equally meaningful. Dad, Mom, Madison. This past year has taught me that families can change and grow. I'm not the same person who felt invisible in this house, and you're not the same people who made me feel that way. I'm excited about Tokyo, but I'm also excited about coming home to a family that sees me clearly. As Tyler's plane lifted off from San Francisco International Airport, bound for Tokyo, he reflected on the extraordinary transformation of the past year. He was no longer the overlooked son seeking recognition from parents who didn't understand his value. He was a successful adult with a loving family who had learned to appreciate him and healthy relationships built on mutual respect rather than dependency or resentment. Tyler's phone contained text messages from his father asking him to stay safe, from his mother sharing articles about Japanese culture, and from Madison promising to start learning Japanese so she could communicate during her planned visit. These messages represented something Tyler had never expected to receive: genuine family support for his adventures and achievements. The Henderson family's story had transformed from a tale of favoritism and neglect into a narrative of growth, recognition, and redemption. Tyler's secret wealth had been the catalyst for this transformation, but the real change had come from honest conversations, shifted priorities, and the willingness of all family members to examine their roles in past dysfunction. In Tokyo, Tyler would continue building his career and expanding his wealth, but he would do so with the knowledge that he had a family who valued him not for his money, but for himself. The recognition he'd sought as a child had finally come, not through dramatic revelations or confrontations, but through the patient work of rebuilding relationships based on understanding and respect. And perhaps most importantly, Tyler had learned that sometimes the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or professional achievements, but in the transformation of relationships that once seemed irreparably damaged. The Henderson family had discovered that it's never too late to become the family that all members deserve to have. Tyler's first months in Tokyo were a whirlwind of professional challenges and cultural adaptation. Leading Nexus Technologies. Asian expansion required him to navigate complex business relationships, regulatory frameworks, and cultural nuances that tested his abilities in entirely new ways. His engineering background served him well, but the leadership role demanded skills he'd never fully developed. The Tokyo office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Shibuya, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city's endless urban sprawl. Tyler's corner office reflected his new status as Regional Director of Blockchain Innovation, a title that carried significant responsibility and substantial financial rewards. His team consisted of 12 highly skilled engineers and developers from 6 different countries, each bringing unique perspectives to the blockchain applications they were developing. Managing this diverse group required Tyler to develop diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity that his previous roles hadn't demanded. Henderson-san, his lead developer Hiroshi Tanaka, addressed him during a team meeting. The banking consortium has expressed concerns about the transaction speed requirements. They need sub-second confirmation times for high-frequency trading applications. Tyler found himself drawing not just on his technical knowledge, but on lessons learned from his family's recent transformation. Just as he'd learned to communicate across the emotional and cultural divide that had separated him from his parents, he now had to bridge technical and cultural gaps in professional settings. "Tanaka-san, let's approach this systematically," Tyler responded, using the formal address structure he'd learned was important in Japanese business culture. "We'll need to redesign the consensus mechanism, but I believe we can achieve the speed requirements without compromising security." The technical challenges were stimulating, but Tyler found equal satisfaction in the cultural learning process. His evenings were spent exploring Tokyo's neighborhoods, sampling local cuisine, and gradually building relationships with colleagues who initially viewed him with polite skepticism, but grew to respect his technical expertise and management style. 3. Months into his Tokyo assignment, Tyler received a video call that demonstrated how dramatically his family relationships had evolved. Madison appeared on his screen looking professional in business attire, calling from her office during her lunch break. "Tyler, I have news I wanted to share with you personally before I tell Mom and Dad," Madison began, her excitement evident despite the digital distance. "What's going on?" Tyler asked, noting that Madison looked more confident and self-assured than he'd ever seen her. "I got promoted to marketing manager, and they're sending me to a conference in Singapore next month. I'll be presenting our nonprofit's community engagement strategy to organizations from across Southeast Asia." Tyler felt genuine pride in his sister's achievement. A year ago, Madison had been unemployed and dependent on their parents for basic necessities. Now she was being recognized for her professional expertise and trusted to represent her organization internationally. "Madison, that's incredible. I'm really proud of what you've built for yourself." "Tyler, I want you to know that your success inspired me to push myself harder. Seeing what you accomplished on your own made me realize I could do more than I thought possible." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Madison sharing details about her work projects, her MBA coursework, and her growing confidence in professional settings. Tyler found himself genuinely enjoying his sister's company in a way that would have been unimaginable during their childhood. "Madison, since you'll be in Singapore, why don't you extend your trip and visit Tokyo? I'd love to show you around the city." Madison's face lit up. "Really? You wouldn't mind having your little sister crash your sophisticated international lifestyle?" Tyler laughed. "Madison, you're not the helpless little sister anymore. You're a successful professional who happens to be related to me. I'd be honored to host you." 2 weeks later, Madison arrived at Narita Airport carrying a single suitcase and wearing the kind of practical travel clothing that the old Madison would never have considered. Tyler barely recognized the confident young woman who navigated the airport with ease and greeted him with a hug that felt natural rather than obligatory. "This city is insane," Madison said, as they rode the train from the airport, staring out at the urban landscape rushing past. "I can't believe you're living here and running an entire division of a tech company." Tyler showed Madison around Tokyo with the enthusiasm of someone who had fallen in love with his adopted city. They visited traditional temples and modern skyscrapers, sampled street food and high-end restaurants, and spent hours walking through neighborhoods that showcased the city's incredible diversity. But the most meaningful part of Madison's visit was the conversation they had one evening while overlooking the city from Tyler's apartment balcony. "Tyler, I need to tell you something," Madison began, her voice unusually serious. "I used to resent your success because it made me feel like a failure. But spending time with you here, seeing what you've built, I realize that your achievements don't diminish mine. We're not competing anymore." Tyler was moved by Madison's honesty. "Madison, we were never really competing. Mom and Dad made us feel like we were, but that was their mistake, not ours. I wasted so many years being jealous of you instead of learning from you," Madison continued. "You were always the smarter one, the more disciplined one, the one who figured things out. I should have been asking for your advice instead of resenting your success." Tyler shook his head. "Madison, you're not less intelligent than me. You just learned different skills. Your ability to connect with people, to understand emotional dynamics, to inspire others, those are valuable talents that I've had to work much harder to develop." The siblings spent the rest of the evening sharing memories from their childhood, but from a new perspective that acknowledged both the dysfunction they'd experienced and the strengths they'd each developed despite it. Madison's visit also included meeting Tyler's colleagues and experiencing his professional world firsthand. She attended a team dinner where Tyler's employees clearly respected and enjoyed working with him, demonstrating leadership skills that Madison had never seen him display. "Your brother is very impressive," Hiroshi Tanaka told Madison during the dinner. "He understands not just the technology, but how to bring people together to solve complex problems." Madison felt a surge of pride that surprised her with its intensity. For the first time in her life, she was genuinely proud to be Tyler's sister, not because of his wealth, but because of his character and capabilities. When Madison returned to the United States, she brought with her a new understanding of Tyler's journey and a deeper appreciation for what he'd accomplished. Her stories about Tokyo and Tyler's life there became a source of family pride that was shared rather than competitive. Robert and Susan were fascinated by Madison's descriptions of Tyler's professional responsibilities and his adaptation to Japanese culture. For the first time, they were hearing about Tyler's life from someone who had witnessed it firsthand, rather than from brief phone calls or professional articles. "Madison says Tyler's team respects him tremendously," Susan reported to Robert after one of Madison's visits. She watched him lead a meeting entirely in English and Japanese, switching between languages depending on what would be most effective for different team members. These secondhand reports of Tyler's success felt different from their previous understanding of his achievements. Instead of abstract financial figures or job titles, they were learning about Tyler's daily life, his relationships with colleagues, and his personal growth in ways that made his success feel real and meaningful. 6 months into Tyler's Tokyo assignment, his portfolio reached a new milestone, $2.5 million. The combination of his substantial salary, continued cryptocurrency gains, and new investments in Japanese real estate had accelerated his wealth accumulation beyond his most optimistic projections. But Tyler's relationship with money had evolved significantly since his college days. Wealth was no longer a defensive strategy against family neglect or a measure of his worth as a person. Instead, it had become a tool for creating opportunities and experiences that enriched his life and relationships. Tyler used his financial resources to bring his parents to Tokyo for a 2-week visit, an experience that transformed their understanding of his life and capabilities. Robert and Susan had never traveled internationally, and seeing their son navigate a foreign culture with confidence and expertise was revelatory. "Tyler, we had no idea what your life here was like," Susan said, as Tyler gave them a tour of his office and introduced them to his team. "You're not just working in Japan, you're thriving here." Robert was equally impressed by Tyler's professional environment and the obvious respect his colleagues showed him. "Son, I'm amazed by what you've built here. This isn't just a job. It's a leadership role that's making a real impact." The family spent their Tokyo days exploring the city together, with Tyler serving as guide and translator. But the evenings were reserved for deeper conversations that continued the healing process that had begun after Tyler's graduation. "Tyler," Robert said one evening over dinner at a traditional restaurant, "I want you to know that seeing you here, in your element, has made me understand something important. We didn't just fail to support you. We failed to see who you really were." Tyler nodded, appreciating his father's continued willingness to acknowledge past mistakes. "Dad, I'm not the same person I was when I felt invisible in our family. This experience in Tokyo has taught me that I can be successful and still maintain meaningful relationships." Susan added her own perspective. "Tyler, watching you interact with your colleagues, seeing how they respect and trust you, I realize that you developed leadership qualities we never recognized or encouraged." The conversation continued late into the evening, with all 3 family members sharing perspectives on how their relationships had evolved and what they hoped for the future. Tyler's parents' visit to Tokyo served as a catalyst for even deeper changes in the Henderson family dynamic. Robert and Susan returned home with stories and photos that showcased Tyler's success in ways that felt personal rather than abstract. More importantly, they returned with a genuine understanding of Tyler's capabilities and character that went far beyond his financial achievements. They had witnessed his problem-solving skills, his cultural adaptability, his leadership style, and his capacity for building meaningful relationships across cultural and linguistic barriers. Madison, inspired by her brother's international experience and her parents' travel stories, began making plans for her own international adventures. She applied for and received a fellowship that would allow her to spend a summer working with nonprofits in Southeast Asia, using the confidence and skills she'd developed in her current role. The Henderson family had transformed from a dysfunctional unit characterized by favoritism and neglect into a supportive network where each member's achievements were celebrated and encouraged. Tyler's initial success had been the catalyst for this transformation, but the real change had come from each family member's willingness to examine their own behavior and grow from their mistakes. As Tyler approached the end of his first year, in Tokyo, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from an overlooked college student to an internationally successful executive with a loving, supportive family. The wealth he'd accumulated was significant, but the relationships he'd rebuilt were invaluable. The boy who had once felt invisible in his own family had become a man whose achievements were recognized, whose opinions were valued, and whose presence was genuinely missed when he was absent. Tyler had discovered that the recognition he'd always sought wasn't about proving his worth to people who had failed to see it, but about building relationships with people who had learned to see him clearly. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.